This committee hearing to order. Welcome everyone to the Transportation Committee hearing of Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. The time is 3:07 p.m. We are in room 1100 of the Minnesota Senate building. Thought we would start with just some quick introductions. It's a new day, a new era, a new committee. We share the gavel, which is kind of cool and very historic. And we also have, of our 12 committee members, so we've grown to 12 members, and of those, we have 5 new people sitting around the table, plus a whole bunch of new staff. So I thought we would start with folks introducing themselves, and we'll bring the staff forward in a moment to introduce themselves, and then we'll get going. We'll have some introductory comments, and then we're just going to get rolling here. So with that, Senator McCune, would you like to kick us off? We'll just go around the table, and then we'll call on staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm State Senator Jen McEwen. I represent Senate District 8, which is almost all of the city of Duluth, a beautiful city which I grew up in and love very much. And I have been on the Transportation Committee now, I think the entire time. This is my 5th year starting now, and I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Andrew Lang. I represent 4 counties in southwestern Minnesota, the largest cities being Willmar and Litchfield, and it's several thousand square miles of area that I cover. And I've been on the Transportation Committee. I was just trying to think about that when she said that. I think it's been 5 years, 6 years? I don't know. I've been harassment to Senator Dept
Time
quite
flies.
a bit, so yeah.
When you're having fun.
Looking forward to, it's a unique year, and the Transportation Committee has grown. I'm sitting further down the table than what I used to, so.
That's by design.
Looking forward to it.
Senator Fonker, representing Eastside St. Paul, and there's an arbitrary boundary where Eastside St. Paul starts. Some old timer told me that it starts from Jackson, street, which is down the street here, or I-35, but more specifically, my district started on RK Highway 61, the popular Highway 61. That's I think one of the folk songs say Highway 61. Bob Dylan, yes.
It's a different Highway 61, but who's?
Yeah. So I'm proud to represent one global direction of St. Paul, which is east. So, and also my honor to serve in this committee as well. This is my 2nd biennium serving this in Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Great, thank you. One of our new members.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Carla Nelson. I live in Rochester. I represent District 24, which includes Olmsted County and all of Dodge County. So very glad to be on this important committee. We have lots of transportation in my district. I'm sure we all do.
Some may think Senator Paz is replacing Senator Bolden, but really you're replacing Senator Bolden to represent the interests of Rochester.
We're going to take care of our transportation.
All right. Quasi new had a little pause, and now she's back.
Yeah, after going on vacation, I'm Senator Ann Johnson Stewart. Thrilled to be back on the Transportation Committee with so many friends and colleagues. This is my 3rd year. I represent Senate District 45, which includes the 15 cities around Lake Minnetonka. And I'm looking forward to the work here and also to seeing what happens with Highway 7, which borders our southern edge. Thank you, Senator.
And Senator Johnson Stewart is one of the co-vice chairs. Mr. Will.
And I'm Alex Will, legislative assistant with Senator Dibble, going on my 3rd year with the committee.
I'm Beth Ethier. I am the co-committee administrator right now, and I'm starting my 3rd session in that role.
And I'm Scott Dibble, one of the co-chairs, and I represent part of Minneapolis. That's most of southwest Minneapolis, half of downtown, a little sliver of North Minneapolis, and I've served on Transportation Committee going all the way back to my time in the House, either as a member of the peanut gallery or as a minority lead or as a chair the entire time I've been in the legislature.
Thanks, Senator Dibble. Senator John Jasinski, also co-chair. Been on transportation for all 9 years that I've been in the legislature, and it's great to see so many friendly faces out in the audience. I recognize about 95% of you over the years in transportation. Very happy to be co-chair with Senator Dibble. I don't think I could have picked a better member from the DFL to co-chair with, and we've always been very proud of having a good relationship back and forth. We don't agree always on policy or some items or some funny items, but we agree on how to get things done for Minnesota. So I want to continue on with that. I'm from Faribault, Minnesota. I was the mayor there for 8 years prior to coming here. Faribault, Ottawa-Waseca are the 3 largest cities, but many, many small cities that we've been involved with, the Medfords and the Morristowns and all kinds of small towns like that that are so important in rural Minnesota. So glad to be on the committee, continue our great work that we've done so far over the past many years, and look forward to working on this year as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dom Linetti. I'm the other co-committee administrator. I'm Senator Jasinski's legislative assistant, and I've been involved with the Transportation Committee and working for him for the past 3 sessions now.
Mr. Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tim Greenfield. I'm the nonpartisan counsel for the Transportation Committee, and this is my 3rd session in that role.
Great. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Krista Boyd, Transportation Fiscal Analyst. This will be my 20th session, I believe, as Fiscal Analyst of the committee, which is crazy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Jeff Howe, I represent District 13, which is part of Stearns and part of Benton counties. This is unbelievably, to me, my 13th year on the Transportation Committee, either 6 in the other chamber and now 7 here in the Senate. So it's a little unbelievable that I've had the privilege to be involved in the legislative transportation process that long. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'm Senator Jim Carlson, and I'm on my 17th year in the Transportation Committee. At one time, I was vice chair when I was just a young pup. But I represent Senate District 52, which includes Burnsville, Egan, and MnDOT Heights, all in Dakota County.
Welcome, Senator Farnsworth, another one of our new members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob Farnsworth, Senate District 7, which is parts of St. Louis County, Itasca County, and Aiken County. Our big transportation request is going to be finishing Highway 169, as you know, which we changed to the Senator David J. Tomasoni Cross Range Expressway. So hopefully we can find all of those piles of hidden money to finish that.
Another new member, Senator Pa.
Thank you, Chair Dable. Senator Susan Pa, representing Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Osseo, Senate District 38. I'm excited to join the Transportation Committee, but I have to admit that I know very little about our transportation here in the state of Minnesota, but I'm hoping to learn from, one, my colleagues, who have a lot of experience here, our staff, and also from our departments. We do have a lot of transportation needs, especially a big project that's been talked about in my district for quite some time is Highway 252. And so that will be something that I will be looking forward to working with the department, our committee, and also just learning more about how we can do that work. Thank you.
Great. And our final new member, Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cal Barr, Senate District 31, and I have served on the Transportation Committee in the House when I was over there, or the other side of the tracks, the other body, whatever the appropriate term is, and I'm looking forward to getting back into the transportation issues. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have Mr. Frazier, Mr. Gillis, if you could step forward and introduce yourselves.
My name is Danny Gillis. I'm the Senate DFL researcher for the committee.
Dave Frazier, Senate Republican researcher.
And pages, come forward, please, and introduce yourselves. These are the folks who really make this committee function and work. So if you need to get our attention, get their attention first, and they'll help you out. Go ahead.
Betsy Rosemar.
William Battle.
Parenting. Great. Thank you. All right. With that, Senator Jasinski, did you want to open with any thoughts or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think I hit them all in the beginning. I look forward to working this year with some overviews today. We hope to get together and get some of our meetings that we get to go back and forth with and get an agreement on what we're going to hear in the next couple meetings. So looking forward to that. And again, it's just great to see all your friendly faces and look forward to getting to work. Thank you.
Great, and I couldn't have said it better myself, everything that he said. So with that, members, we're going to ease in with some overviews from our Senate Counsel and our Senate Fiscal staff. They've prepared a little bit of a primer, particularly to refresh us and to get our new members acquainted with some of the larger themes of what our committee is tasked with. And then no time like the present. Time is short. We started session late and we got this committee started a little late, so we're going to just go ahead and hear from the agencies about what they're looking for to get out of this legislative session with a couple of budget overviews from public safety, and the governor will hear from Met Counsel at some future date. And then a topic that's probably on everyone's mind because we get a lot of calls from our constituents. We're going to hear about driver's license testing exam appointments. So with that, I'll throw it to Counsel and Fiscal.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Members of the committee, I'd like to direct you to a document in your handouts, in your packet, that's the Transportation Committee's jurisdiction list. And it provides a somewhat complete picture of the committee's jurisdiction relating to bills that it may hear during this biennium. The first table are the main state agencies that are under the statutory jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee, and bills that would deal with these state agencies. We would have the primary jurisdiction as the committee to hear those bills. Of note, the Division of Driver and Vehicle Services under the Department of Public Safety, the statutory reference in Chapter 168 also is significantly important in Chapter 171, which pertains to driver's licenses and the regulation of driver's education and the issuance of the credentials to drive on Minnesota roads. And then finally, the last item in the main state agency table, the Department of Transportation also has a variety of statutory roles throughout Minnesota statutes. The commissioner's authority is spelled out in Chapter 174, but they also have licensing and carrier regulations in Chapters 218 and Chapters 221. They regulate aeronautics in Chapters 360, and they also, a variety of the funding mechanisms and the provisions governing road and highway constructions are governed in Chapters 160 to 167. So even though the Department of Transportation is identified as their powers being located in Section 174.01, there are a variety of MnDOT rules and statutes elsewhere in the transportation statutes, and we would also have authority to hear those bills. The second table also identifies other offices that the committee would have primary jurisdiction over. Of note, the Metropolitan Council and Metropolitan Transit are Met Transit would also be two areas where the Transportation Committee would have primary jurisdiction. I'll also identify the confirmation authority for the Senate Transportation Committee. We've already confirmed the term of Commissioner Daubenberger for the Department of Transportation, but there is still the confirmation of the chair of the Metropolitan Council and its 16 members. Ms. Boyd will highlight the budget jurisdiction in much more detail than I will, so I'm going to skip to the bottom line dealing with other issues that the committee has jurisdiction over, including driver and vehicle licensing, disability parking, certain taxes that pertain to transportation, such as the gas tax and the motor vehicle sales tax, outdoor advertising and highway signage, pipeline and pipeline safety, including Gopher State One Call, public transit, school buses, traffic laws except for driving while impaired laws covered in Chapter 169A, and railroads and other forms of motor carriers under Chapter either 218 or Chapter 221. And I won't go through item by item on the second item that's been passed out to members' packets, kind of potential other areas of interest. I'll note that I put this list together not as a claim of jurisdiction, but rather areas or other potential areas of law that have been amended by the Transportation Committee or a transportation policy or finance omnibus that may be of note to committee members, and it covers a wide variety of transportation-related issues. But again, this is not meant to be a jurisdictional list or say that if a bill amends this issue that it automatically has to come to transportation, but rather that we should be mindful and cognizant of potential bills that could impact transportation's jurisdiction. And it's a front and back page, so you'll see that there's a variety of items. And of note, at the last item, the criminal code, of course, any amendment that we would make in transportation to driving offenses such as criminal vehicular operation or fleeing a peace officer, that bill is either likely to originate in judiciary or most definitely would need to go to judiciary should it be referred to transportation first. I'm happy to answer any questions about this list or any other specific items. I did mention go for state one call, but it's not included on this list. We did amend provisions related to that in our policy omnibus last year, but I forgot to include it on this list. So for purposes of completeness, that's the only thing I'd want to add. If there are any other questions about the committee's jurisdiction, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Greenfield, and I'm fine that you didn't put that on there because I really hope we don't have to revisit that conversation this year. That was a lot of work. So with that, members, any questions for Mr. Greenfield or for myself or Senator Jasinski about the subjects that we have jurisdiction over or sometimes touch on? All right, thank you. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this working? Okay. I have two handouts. I'm going to start with a colored one that's the first page says Transportation Agencies and Programs. And I just want to frame this. This is not a comprehensive overview of transportation finance. I don't think we have the time for that today. But I'm in the midst of putting together a larger document. I know we have a number of new members, and I'll share that. And if the chairs would like further time in committee to go over that in more depth, I'm happy to do that. But any questions on what I have today would be welcome as well. So transportation agencies and programs, Mr. Greenfield touched on this, but just a little more in depth. These are mainly the three agencies that the committee concerns itself with. The Department of Transportation, the full Department of Transportation is under the jurisdiction of this committee. The divisions that we appropriate to are multimodal systems, including basically everything that's not highways. Transit, aeronautics, freight, passenger rail, those are generally general funds or the state airport fund. State roads, construction, maintenance, program delivery, and debt service is generally all trunk highway fund appropriated. Local roads are funded through dedicated funds, county state aid and municipal state aid. And I'll go over this in more detail on the next pages. Agency management, just the administration of the department, is generally trunk highway with some general funds. Next, Metropolitan Council. Under the Transportation Committee are the areas of Metro Transit and Metro Mobility. Parks and wastewater under Metropolitan Council are dealt with in another committee. This is generally all, through this committee, there are direct appropriations from general fund for these, but also dedicated funds, as we'll see later, through the Transit Assistance Fund. Also, third is the Department of Public Safety, a very large department that we have roughly half of in this committee. Other divisions within the department are in the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. In transportation, we have State Patrol, which is all patrolling highways, including commercial vehicle enforcement, and then Capital Security. State Patrol is all funded through the Trunk Highway Fund, except for Capital Security, which is all general fund. Driver and Vehicle Services, which is funded through fees collected by the department on transactions for vehicles and driver's licenses, and those are appropriated by the legislature through the Special Revenue Fund. The Office of Traffic Safety is funded through general fund and trunk highway fund appropriations that leverage federal funds through different grants relating to traffic safety. Pipeline safety is funded through the Special Revenue Fund on fees collected from pipeline operators. Administration and related services, the full division of administration in the Public Safety Department is under the jurisdiction of this committee. It might touch on areas that are funded directly through the Judiciary Committee. And that is generally general fund and trunk highway fund appropriations to that division. The trunk highway fund appropriations relate to State Patrol administration. I'm going to give, in the next set of documents, I'm going to give a slight update on the forecast, the November forecast, but I want to give just a sense of what we're doing here in this committee, especially for the new members. And there were quite a number of updates to transportation finance in the last biennial budget, so I'll highlight those as well. The next page on the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund is basically the workhorse of transportation finance, and if you understand this sheet, you understand a lot about transportation finance. So the middle is the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. This is a biennial snapshot according to the forecast of the next budget, biennial budget 26 and 27. Total revenue to that fund is about $6.4 billion for the biennium. That revenue flows in through some dedicated funds, some under the Constitution and some by statute. And I'll go through those very briefly. The top three, gas tax, vehicle registration tax, and motor vehicle sales tax on the top, are all constitutionally dedicated. Gas tax and vehicle registration tax, 100% of those revenues go into the HUTDF, and 60% of the MVEST, the sales tax revenues, go into the HUTDF, the remainder to transit, both metro and statewide. So gas tax revenues for the next biennium are forecast to be about $2 billion. The base tax rate is 25 cents with a 3.5 cent per gallon debt service surcharge to pay down some trunk highway bonds. That is now under the Chapter 68 in 2023 was enacted that is now indexed to inflation, not to exceed 3% in a year. The first increase under that law went into effect actually this month, and I believe the new rate is effective 31.8 cents a gallon total, including the debt service surcharge. Vehicle registration tax is $2.4 billion for the next biennium projected. 100% of those revenues go to HUTDF. That is a $10 fee on a vehicle assessed yearly, plus 0.575% of the base value of the vehicle on a depreciation schedule. And that is outlined in statute. Motor vehicle sales tax, 6.875%, matches the, sorry, it's going out of my head. I believe we raised that to 6.875, right? Okay, and the last, it used to be 6.5. Okay, 6.875%. 60% of those revenues go into HUTDF, and for the next biennium, that's going to be about $1.5 billion. And then in the fourth box is other taxes. Those are, some of those have been in effect, or those have been in effect for a few years, I think since 2017. I might be misstating that. Those are a portion of the auto part sales tax, which used to go all into the general fund. The HUTDF now gets 43.5% of that. There are two rental car taxes, and 100% of those revenues go into HUTDF, and 11% of the motor vehicle leasing sales tax flows in. And those total up to $467 million for the next biennium. Those are not constitutionally dedicated. Those are dedicated by statute. There's info on other revenue, investment income, and other uses of the fund. I'll just point out very briefly, most of the other uses on the left there, the $56.3 million, are pass-through amounts for to DNR accounts related to the gas tax for people that, you know, buy gas for their snowmobile and they're not using the snowmobile on the road. So a portion of the gas tax goes into some DNR accounts to fund trails, et cetera. Okay, so the uses of the fund are below. The vast majority goes on a formula to the main highway funds, 95% of the distribution. 62% of that distribution goes to the trunk highway fund. For the next biennium, that'll be about $3.74 billion. Those funds are directly appropriated by the legislature. The vast majority for trunk highway construction and maintenance, also debt service repayments, and a portion of that is for the state patrol under DPS. Excuse me, I need to 29% of that distribution goes to the county state aid highway fund. This money is distributed to counties by a statutory formula based on various criteria. And then 9% to the municipal state aid street fund, and that is about $542 million for the next biennium. That is also goes out by formula, however, a much simpler formula. And that goes out to cities in the state with over 5,000 in population. Then 5% of the HUTDF is distributed, as you see on the bottom right. That distribution can be reallocated by the legislature no more than once every 6 years. I believe it has been more than 6 years, and it could be reallocated. It has been this way for quite a number of years. The majority goes to the flexible highway account. This is distributed to MnDOT, mostly for turnbacks, roads that will be turned back to a local road authority, and there is some agreement between the state and the local road authority to get that up to a certain standard. And that's about $170 million per year. And then 46.5% is distributed. That's about $147 million, or I said per year, I meant the next biennium. $147 million for the next biennium is apportioned to each county and distributed to towns within that county, again, according to a formula.
Boyd, I thought I would just mention that federal funds that come in from the Federal Highway Administration don't pass through the HUTDF, but are deposited directly into the Trunk Highway Fund, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Federal funds directly from FHWA are deposited in Trunk Highway Fund and also have to be directly appropriated by the legislature. And other federal funds relating to transportation would go into the federal fund. So that would be more transit, aeronautics, things like that. I can pause because that's a pretty weighty slide. If anyone has any questions they want to.
Does anyone have any questions on this? If you remember nothing else, remember 6229-9. I have a tattoo of that somewhere on my body. All right. Any questions? All right. Oh, Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you remind me, when was that formula established? Isn't it quite, I would say, decades old? Does anybody have that info?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, you'll find that formula in the Constitution. I'm not sure exactly when that was determined in the Constitution, but it goes back a ways. Ms. Boyd, do you know when that was?
The year? Was it the 1950s, I believe? Yes, I would say that. 1953 pops into my head, but I don't know if that's right. But yeah, that's a longstanding constitutional formula that has not changed since its enactment.
Great. Thanks. All right, going on to the newly created TAA, the Transportation Advancement Account.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did a new slide for this account. It's a smaller account considerably compared to the HUTDF, but it's new. We're still seeing what the revenue forecast, the revenue picture is to this, so I just wanted to point it out in particular. So in the middle is the Transportation Advancement Account. For the next biennium, the total revenue is projected to be $148 million. The majority of that from the new retail delivery fee that was enacted effective this fiscal year, so since last July, I believe. And just a reminder that that's a 50-cent fee on deliveries over a threshold amount of $100 pre-tax. There are some exemptions, generally food deliveries, groceries, medical drugs, medical devices, things like that. The other revenue source for the TAA is the auto parts sales tax, a portion of that. As I said earlier, that sales tax used to all go into the general fund. Several years ago, a portion was, a flat amount actually every year was given to the HUTDF, dedicated to that. Now the formula has been reconstituted, and the general fund amount from the auto parts sales tax is decreasing every year. By 2030, fiscal year 2033, there will be no more general fund dedication. It will be 43.5% to HUTDF and the remainder to this account. So right now, in fiscal year 26, it's 5.5% of the sales tax 27, it'll go up to 7.5%, and on the bottom, on the first asterisk, just says in 2033 that'll eventually be 56.5 of all of sales tax revenue. And then on the bottom, you'll see the dedication. This account was designed to fund things other than state roads, including some that had no dedicated funds prior to this, small cities in particular. So just very briefly, the breakdown is 36% to metro counties. Right now, that is 53 million projected for the next biennium. 27% to small cities, and those are under population 5,000 that receive no state aid funds otherwise. And that's 40 million for the next biennium. Larger cities are what we're calling those that are basically MSA cities. Those are population over 5,000 that generally also receive municipal state aid money through the HUTDF. And that is 22 million for the next biennium. 11% to town roads. Town roads also gets a dedication on the HUTDF. This is on top of that, 16 million for the next biennium. And then county state aid highways, 10%, another basically 15 million for the next biennium on top of the HUTDF dedication from the last slide. And then a small portion, 1%, is dedicated to a food delivery support account. That is, the revenues go out, the account is not under our jurisdiction, I believe it's under the Department of Human Services, and that's 1.5 million for the next biennium. Okay.
Any
there are
questions?
No questions there.
All right, thank you.
And then just a really brief slide, just an overview, a lot more detail than this, but on transit operations funding. A lot of talk about roads. I wanted to just give a picture of transit. There are three main sources: general fund, direct appropriations, and the biennial budget to the transit offices, Metro Transit within Metropolitan Council, and the Office of Transit within MnDOT, which funds locally operated transit systems throughout the state. And the first three bars, I'm sorry, I'm still going over the revenue sources. And the next greatest one, the next greatest one is Transit Assistance Fund. That is revenues from the motor vehicle sales tax and the motor vehicle leasing sales tax. However, the leasing sales tax only goes to MnDOT for Greater Minnesota Transit. But they both, Greater and Metro, both get a portion of the MVEST. And then the newest source is the regional sales tax in the Metro. And that is in purple on your sheet. That is 83% of that revenue goes to Met Council to fund transit systems. 5% of that is for active transportation, bike and ped sort of projects. The other 17% is distributed to metro counties on a formula in statute. So just very briefly, you can see the size of these appropriations and the comparative between Met Council and MnDOT. I want to focus first on the general fund, the blue bars, or the middle bar of Met Council, if you don't have it in color. About 300 million projected, that's their base general fund for the next biennium. However, the vast majority of that is the forecasted amount to fund metro mobility. I think that's about 235 million for the next biennium. And the rest, about 65 million, would be for transit services. And then 850 million for the transit assistance. Again, that's all the MVEST, the motor vehicle sales tax piece that goes to Met Council. And then the projection for the metro sales tax for the next biennium, and this is only the 83% from Met Council, is about 973 million. I believe that figure might need to be updated, but that's roughly what it is. And then you'll see comparatively, MnDOT it's a lot smaller than Met Council. About 36.7 million base budget from general fund for local transit systems throughout the state, and then 226.8 million projected both from MVEST and the leasing sales tax. And this is, I should say, this is only state sources, so this does not reflect any sort of levies at the disposal of Met Council or anything like that for capital programs. This is only for state sources. So. If there are no questions on that, I'll move on to, you should have a document in your packet, just a couple sheets from MnDOT, the Transportation Funds Forecast, November 2024. These are just a couple of the balance sheets that I want to point out what the revenues are doing. This is a much longer document, and some of our newer members might not have received it, so I'll make sure all the committee members get a copy of that.
And I'll expect everyone to read the entire booklet, and there'll be tests on it later.
I think it's about 36 pages, but it's very comprehensive. It's very informative, and I rely on it every forecast, going over the sources and the uses of the funds. Okay, so just on the first page, I just want to point out the second paragraph just is a very broad, telling you what the revenues are doing. And these are the revenues that are going into the Highway User Tax Fund. This is a summary of them. The gas tax, the registration tax, the MVEST, the other funds. And then you can see that in the 24-25 biennium, the revenues compared to the last February forecast went up by a small amount, 0.4%, but about 21 million. And then in the next biennium, 26-27, that revenues are projected to increase about 2.5% compared to the last forecast. So you can see in that little chart down below, that's just for fiscal year 2025. So maybe don't look at the dollar amount, but the percentage change. All of those sources increased under the forecast. And then you can see a little, unfortunately, we did this in black and white, not color, but if you see in the little line graph up above, the top line is the November forecast and the bottom is the February. So you can see that they're all coming in a little bit above the February forecast amounts. And I'm going to turn to the second page. I'm, believe me, not going to go over every number in this balance sheet. I just want to point out that in the second, you'll see under net revenue and transfers in, there are the list of sources that I went over in the highway user tax sheet. The gas tax, the registration tax, the MVEST, and then the other non-constitutional sources. And what I want to point out is in the last two columns, these are fiscal year 26 and 27 projected revenues. Under the forecast, that those are all positive numbers, just showing you how much they're increasing. You'll see there's a slight decrease under fiscal year 24, but other beyond that, that all the sources are increasing. And then if you turn to the next, if there's no questions on that, if you'll turn to the next page, it's a balance sheet for the trunk highway fund under the forecast. I provided this because I just wanted to point out, you know, the committee makes a lot of direct appropriations from the trunk highway fund for MnDOT and DPS uses. The figure to look at here is down near the bottom. There's a line that says unreserved fund balance per policy. There is the department has a fund balance policy that you'll see the line above that. That's the amount that is held back per that policy to keep the fund healthy. And the number under that, if you look at fiscal year 27, it's about 240.8 million. That would be the unreserved fund balance generally available for appropriation above the base budget in the next biennium. That's all I wanted to point out on that sheet, so you have that. And then two more briefly. The next is the balance sheet for the Transit Assistance Fund. And I wanted to show, again, that sources are, the revenues are increasing under the last forecast. The 26 and 27 columns on the end, you can see the amounts, maybe 7 rows down for total motor vehicle sales tax and the leased vehicle sales tax. Those sources are both increasing in revenue compared to the last forecast. So I'm not giving a lot of detail. I just want to make clear to the committee that how the forecast is doing. And then the last balance sheet.
And I just want to be clear, when we say Transit Assistance Fund and we're talking about MnDOT, we're talking about Greater Minnesota Transit, so not metro area transit. Just
you can see that the Transit Assistance Fund has a metro account and a Greater Minnesota account. So you'll see those two lines. That is how the motor vehicle sales tax is apportioned. You'll see a line that says total motor vehicle sales tax. And above that is that broken down between Metro and Greater Minnesota.
Thank you.
And then the next line below that, the leased vehicle sales tax is only for Greater Minnesota through MnDOT.
Great. Thanks.
And then the last page is the fund balance sheet for the transportation advancement account. I wanted to point this out because this is the delivery fee in particular is a new source. When it was enacted 2 years ago, there were projections made And this is a little bit based on actual revenue and adjusted forecast. So you can see that compared to at enactment and last forecast, the projection, the numbers have gone down a bit. If you look in the last 2 or 3 columns, the first line is the delivery fee. And for 26 and 27, that revenues are about 40 million below projection in the last forecast as we sort of get to know the practice of this fee. But the sales tax on auto parts was as projected before. I'm not sure where the line's not on there, but that source has gone up as well. And that is all I wanted to point out on that for your information, unless there are more questions about it at this point.
And I'll just mention for committees, members' benefits, and to refresh memories, the auto part sales tax phase-in over 10-ish years would have been a little shorter time, but the blessing and the curse of having mostly dedicated revenues as a committee jurisdiction means that it's kind of hard to get into the general fund scrum sometimes. And so as we were throwing elbows and trying to get a larger target for general fund in the coming biennium as well as in the out years, we just couldn't quite get there. And so that phase-in was stretched out to 10 years. We'd like to shorten it. That's on everyone's wish list. It's something that the 2 co-chairs agree on, and we'll just keep working on it. Would love all of your efforts too, because as you can see, as it was mentioned in the presentation, a number of areas are funded in a stable, predictable way that we had never done as a state, and that was a huge achievement on our part in the last biennium, and we'd just like to make that happen better and faster. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Boyd, so for the audience and the rest of the new members, can you explain why the delivery fee amounts are below what they were originally estimated at? What was the biggest factors in that?
Mr. Chair, I can attempt to. My understanding is just that this was a new fee that the state had never assessed before. It was based on another state's practice with this fee, but Minnesota enacted different exemptions than, I believe it was Colorado. Minnesota enacted different exemptions than that state had. We needed to see what it did in practice is the best explanation I can give, and maybe smarter people than me from the department or Department of Revenue can explain, but we're just getting to know it, I think.
That's good. Thank you, Madam. Or thank you, Ms. Boyd.
And Mr. Chair, if I could really briefly, I meant to say this at the outset. I'm sorry I don't have a slide on it. I'm not going to throw a bunch of numbers at you, but you mentioned the general fund, and it's true that the vast majority of our budget is dedicated funds. So our overall all funds budget is $12 billion, and only $481 million of that biennially is from the general fund. So if you look at the statewide general fund picture, only 0.4%, I believe, or 0.7 now, we're up to 0.7. 0.7% of total general fund expenditures are spent in the transportation area. We are not a big player in the general fund. So.
Thank you. Questions, members? All right, it's a lot, but we can go back over this, or I know Ms. Boyd is always responsive to any questions, or we can have a huddle in one of our offices if you want to learn more and talk more about all of these elements. But you're going to get to know these charts and these numbers and love them so much because we're going to talk a lot about them. So with that, we will roll into our next item. Speaking of numbers and budgets, we are going to invite Commissioner Nancy Daubenberger forward. We're so pleased to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on the first committee hearing of this biennium. And she's going to be joined by her trustee lieutenants. So welcome, Commissioner Daubenberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is Nancy Daubenberger, and as Chair Dibble mentioned, I'm the Commissioner of MnDOT, very privileged to serve in that role, and I am joined today by my colleague Eric Rudine, who is our Director of Government Affairs for MnDOT, as well as Sam Brown, who is our Budget Director. And Sam is going to run the slides for us today, and based on what questions you have, certainly the more technical financial questions I would like to defer to Mr. Brown, but I'm looking forward to not only presenting our governor's budget, but also any questions you have. So thank you so much for having us here today. So yeah, I did the introductions, but also hit on MnDOT vision and mission for our agency, our goals, and then most of the presentation is our governor's budget recommendations. Next slide. All right, so MnDOT's vision and mission. Our vision is for a multimodal transportation system that maximizes the health of people, the environment, and our economy. And our mission is to plan, build, operate, and maintain a safe, accessible, efficient, and reliable multimodal transportation system that connects people to destinations and markets throughout the state, regionally, and around the world. Next slide. And these 5 goals are MnDOT's goals as part of our strategic operating plan: promote a safety culture, advance transportation equity, champion sustainability actions, maximize stewardship of resources, and foster a thriving workforce. And as Ms. Boyd was just spotlighting, as you likely know, despite the roughly $600 million surplus in the coming biennium for general funds, the state does face about a $5 billion deficit in the 28-29 biennium in general funds, which is a serious challenge. And our governor's budget addresses this head on. But while the general fund is facing challenges, the health of the Trunk Highway Fund is good at this time. Next slide. So we have 8 different budget items we're recommending to be funded, 6 through trunk highway funds, one of them with mostly trunk highway funds and a small amount of general funds, and one with the state airports fund. The acronyms you see on the slide, just want to point out SAF on this, in this reference is State Airport Fund. Why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide. We also have items that we'll touch on near the end that are, they have a fiscal impact, but they are not items we're seeking appropriations at this time. So some of them are language changes, but that have a fiscal impact. Some of them are extensions of previous appropriations, and then some are policy recommendations that are related to financial items. Slide. All right. And so we'll go on now to the 8 items for which we're recommending appropriations. First, operating pressures. And so we're recommending $22.2 million in trunk highway funds in fiscal year 26, $32.8 million each year thereafter, and then $146,000 in general funds in fiscal 26, and $296,000 each year thereafter. And these are to address rising cost pressures and mitigate impacts to service levels. So that's our compensation costs, our IT service increases that we're seeing. The small amount of general fund dollars is for the offices of freight rail and passenger rail. They are not funded trunk highway funds. Next slide. Then the state road construction appropriation. So since our STIP was last revised and approved late last summer, we need additional authority to expend the additional federal funds coming to us, and for which we're seeking some state funds to match. And so with the federal funds, you'll see as it's laid out here, that includes dollars that we've already been awarded but will begin spending in fiscal year 26. So that's the larger amount. And then what you see there in the years 27 through 29, those are assuming for formula funds the increases that we'll see in those years. Next slide. And then Blatnick Bridge Spending Authority. We are proposing to separate budget authority to track and manage this large bridge project since it's quite a bit of funding. So $650 million in federal funds is coming to us. That's primarily the Minnesota share of the INFR grant that we received. And just a couple notes there. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2026. Then the next.
Commissioner, how long is that construction going to take?
At this time, it's a thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. At this time, it's projected to be about at least 4 years of construction through 2030 for the major part of the construction.
Thank you. And the old bridge is just coming down, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the old bridge is going to be removed, and the new bridge will be built in its place for the most part, and that is to minimize environmental impacts for the most part, and most cost-effective to build it on existing alignment.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the question. So this next one is the aeronautics revenue restructure. And this is since we haven't seen an adjustment to this fund in over a decade. Over the last year, we've worked to propose a restructuring to bring additional revenues into the state airport fund and worked with stakeholders to get their input on this proposal. Although once thrilled to have additional fees come through. What we did here is the understanding of the need for this, as well as the interest in seeing it balanced between both the flight property tax levy as well as the increase in aircraft registration. So overall, the proposed change reflects about a 6% increase in revenues in the state airport fund. And that's to fund airports across the state, including the runways. So this appropriation increase from the state airport fund of $2.7 million annually is what we'd be seeing here. We have 133 publicly owned airports and 6 privately owned airports that are open for public use. Next appropriation is the MPO Transportation Planning Grants. So this is for $34,000 in trunk highway funds for metropolitan planning organizations. And this is for state highway related planning work. This increase in funds for planning work with MnDOT to better align land use planning and transportation system planning. And there's a note here too. MPOs have not received an increase since the annual planning and research funds were established in 2003. Next one is corridor planning. So this is a $3 million base trunk highway fund increase recommended to support statewide corridor planning. We've been doing this work for a while. We put together a policy advisory committee over the last year, along with the technical advisory committee. And this is to integrate state priorities with the selection and development of future state highway projects and to make sure our work is aligning with local plans. We've been doing this work with federal dollars, but those dollars are running out. So this is a recommendation to fund with state funds so we can continue this work going forward. And next one is recruitment and retention. So this recommendation is for $765,000 in base trunk highway funds to make MnDOT a workplace of choice. It includes funding human resources staffing, staff support programs, and a 10-year strategic staffing plan. So developing that with the additional resources to help us with recruitment and retention. And, then the last one here, before I go into the other items, but facilities modernization. So this is $3.2 million in base trunk highway funding for MnDOT facilities modernization, and this is to modernize truck stations. When we talk about modernizations, we're talking about, currently they have outdated doors, windows, HVAC systems, roofs, but truck stations. So not our central office here on the Capitol complex or district headquarters. These are for the truck stations to maintain at a desirable level. Next slide. Right, now I'll go on to some language change recommendations. First, Met Counsel loan. So this would be legislation to permit MnDOT to receive funds from the Metropolitan Council's Regional Transportation Sales and Use Tax, and that would help to fund improvements on the state highway system at the same time that transit improvements are being done. And primarily we're talking here about State Highway 65 and the F-line transit, arterial bus transit. So this would be a loan to MnDOT to do work that we're planning to do anyway, but to move that up and time it with the F-line improvements. And then our landscape partnership. This would be a modification to the 2024 operations maintenance appropriation that grants $1 million for landscape improvements. It's a very specific program for MnDOT to enter into an agreement with local agencies for the initial work, but this would allow us to address the refreshing areas or address needs within these areas by MnDOT ourselves, especially where things just have needed to be addressed again, have needs in these areas. So that would make that funding eligible to go back and plant trees or replant landscaping. And then the environmental product declaration, so that would make a modification to the 2023 climate and energy finance appropriation for MnDOT to remove the language that relates to awarding grants. So this would allow us to work with our contractors on the procurement type they're used to, which would be our regular contracting process, as opposed to needing to set up a grant process for contractors. So that would allow us to get these funds out in a more traditional and efficient way. And then, next slide, we have some extension recommendations. These are appropriations for which we would like to see the extension dates moved out to June 30th of 2027. So the Upper Sioux property conveyance, that's the Yellow Medicine River. There was a slope failure area where we're addressing the bridge and pavement that's needed there, and that project is planned to be let this October. So we need an extension there. The two Amtrak appropriations, one is for capital and one is for operating. And those are for the Borealis line, but that has kicked off. We have launched the Borealis service. It's been successful, but we still have commitments to make the improvements along the corridor. CPKC Railroad has allowed us to get that going prior to making these improvements, but those are still needed. And Reconnect Rondo, those dollars that they've received are flowing through MnDOT. They have spent most of them. They have a small balance left, so we need an extension there. And then the MPO greenhouse gas modeling. There are some MPOs that still would like to be able to use those funds to model greenhouse gases, or looking for an extension to allow them to do that. And then Highways for Habitat, we have the $1 million appropriation. We'd still like to extend that out beyond, out to June 30th of 27 to allow expenditures for the multiple growing years and needs that we'll have to get that program fully established. Next slide. Then we have policy recommendations that are related to financial items. So the first one there being drone fees, reduced registration fees for drones that are part of a one-day event. Our Office of Sustainability and Public Health Grant-Making Authority. We'd like to establish MnDOT's Office of Sustainability and Public Health Authority to provide grants. They did get some grant-making authority as part of the 2023 legislation that allowed them to provide grants through our NEVI program, but this would set that up for grants in the future as well. Active transportation solicitation frequency. This would be to remove the requirement for the active transportation to annually conduct solicitations. So working with our traditional agency recipients to establish workable intervals. It would allow us to roll over applications from year to year rather than having to reapply. And then the short line rail, this would be revisions to transfer components of short line railroad infrastructure modernization credits. So this is a partnership with the Department of Revenue and would allow railroad taxpayers to transfer the credit after expenditures have been made for the year, but prior to filing a tax return. So at this point, MnDOT would support the program with our current staff, so not asking for an appropriation there. And that is it. Thank you for letting us go through those recommendations, and we stand for questions.
Questions, members? All right. Oh, Senator Johnson Stewart and then Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chair, I just have 3 short questions. Just for clarification, on page 18, when you're asking for an extension, and I apologize, I'm not up to speed on the language like more committed or more experienced members, but this is just extending the time within which the money must be spent, not appropriating new money, correct?
Senator Johnson Stewart, that is correct, but I will look to fiscal staff to confirm. Ms. Boyd?
Mr. Chair, that's my understanding as well, that there was a time set for this money and the department just needs a little more time, but it's no new money.
Okay.
All right. And I see Commissioner Dobbenberger nodding her head vigorously in agreement. All right.
All right. My second question.
Senator Johnson Stewart.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My second question is, how does MnDOT define a corridor? Is that, well, how does MnDOT define a corridor? Is it by length? Is it by designation? Mr. Chair.
I assume you're honing in on the corridor planning.
Yeah, so what's the definition of a corridor?
Appropriation that would replace federal spending. Commissioner Dobbenberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Johnson Stewart for that question. I will take a shot at corridor. So when I think of a corridor that we're planning for, I think of the highway by designation, but really it's the system of roadways that will be accessed by that. And so we're needing to take a broader look at a corridor and plan through the different communities for what the needs are going to be around that. I'm going to pause here and see if Eric might have something to add to that, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Mr. Rudin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Rudin, MnDOT Government Affairs. And I don't think there's a specific length. I think it would depend on the situation. Maybe to give an example, we met recently with Senator Howe and others about Trunk Highway 23 and the city of Rockville and their desire to have an interchange constructed. And then at some point in the meeting, somebody said, well, you know, if there's going to be an interchange in Rockville, should it be at the location we were discussing, or should it actually be on the other side of town? And so I think these corridor plans help us to identify, you know, those answers to some of those questions. What's kind of the long-term vision for a corridor? Where should the interchange and access be located?
A follow-up?
Senator Johnson Stewart.
So is this a change across the board, or would it be you'd be looking at corridors on a case-by-case basis when appropriate versus a specific interchange. I mean, I like the idea. I just want you to know that. I'm just curious how MnDOT chooses to apply that.
Great. Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Johnson Stewart. Yes, we anticipate this funding would allow us to do probably about 6 corridor planning studies, or to initiate about 6 corridor planning studies per year. So, you know, it wouldn't be the entire trunk highway system all at once, but those locations that the districts identify as sort of benefiting from those long-range planning efforts, those would be the ones that we would address.
Good. I have one more yes/no question.
Senator Johnson.
I'm interested in the facilities modernization, and I understand that the money here is for truck stations. My question is, does MnDOT own its district offices? And I realize there's many, so the answer may be yes and no, but I'm curious how MnDOT manages the facilities that are the district offices where the engineering and planning staff sit. Mr. Chair.
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Senator Johnson Stewart, yes, when it comes to the district facilities, those are owned by MnDOT. Maybe a caveat there is we do share some of the space with other agencies in some of the district locations too, but those are typically by lease then, and then with the central office, that is Department of Administration, and we lease from them.
Oh, okay. But this facilities This facilities modernization is specifically for truck stations, correct? Okay, that's it.
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Further questions, members? Senator Jasinski. Oh, I'm sorry. Jumped over Senator McEwen. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation today. I appreciate it very much. I have a couple of questions. The first has to do with the slide that you were telling us a little bit about the plans for recruitment and retention. I wonder if you can give us a little bit more detail about your plan for that. What exactly are the proposed allocations going to be used for in your recruitment efforts?
And if I could just layer onto that question, with your indulgence, Senator McEwen, $765,000 of trunk highway funds is a lot, and so what are you going to do, and why do we need to do it? Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator McEwen, for that question. A number of different things are a part of this particular recommendation. One was human resources staffing, and we're looking at an additional 5 FTEs. We have some staff support programs that we have planned that we're looking to have over these next 2 bienniums, and needing funding for those. And then developing a strategic staffing plan, so additional support for being able to develop that and get recommendations on how MnDOT should move forward with improving how we recruit and retain employees. And I'll pause there. Eric, do you want to add anything to that, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair, from our narrative?
Mr. Rudin, looked like you wanted to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, we can follow up with some additional information too, but basically support programs to help build loyalty, promote job satisfaction, reduce turnover, things of that nature that make MnDOT a more attractive workplace. So that's kind of the goal behind the initiative.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Could you just tell me a little bit more what you mean by support programs? So we have 5 FTEs that would be for human resources, and presumably is there a shortage in the human resources department? Or I'm just wondering, because typically I would imagine, you could consider things like, what sort of enticements would make it a better place to work in these support programs, perhaps, are what you're talking about. But I'm wondering, So yeah, 5 FTEs in human resources, frankly, just seems like a lot. And I'm wondering what these support programs, like what kind of support are you talking about when you're talking about support programs?
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen. So to touch on the types of programs, and Eric was listing more broadly what they might be, but one is organizational health wellness. So when it comes to mental health of employees, having a staff person and continuing that work, we might need additional consultant help with some of our other programs here too, like developing a strategic staffing plan. But so there are other incentive sort of programs that we're going to be we have set up, or we're going to continue and look for additional ways to attract and retain. But some of the funding would go towards that as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could add just a little bit more on the new employees for human resources. We have identified that one of the reasons we lose employees when we're trying to hire new employees is that we're not able to move quickly enough. And so if somebody is out of work and they have a job offer from a city or a county, and we are not able to move quickly enough to get that person hired and come work for MnDOT, then we actually lose them to a different employer. And so that's one of the goals as well, is of beefing up that HR staffing.
Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. So there's a sort of sense of like being able to onboard people faster who are interested in employment with MnDOT could help to create retention and actually bring people in. That's interesting to hear. And I just would encourage you to also reach out to employees of MnDOT to see what are the things that they also believe. And I don't know, maybe you have made some reach out to employees, but I would definitely encourage you to look to those people who are doing those jobs and can really offer some good feedback about what will help them be able to stay and what also might help recruit new people in. I just want to move on to another subject that I've been following, and that is the Rethinking I-94 proposal. And I think that it's a really exciting proposal, and I have been following it, even though I'm not in the Twin Cities. As you know, I'm up in Duluth, and there's also some unrelated directly to that proposal, the I-94 proposal, but in Duluth, there's also been some enthusiasm about kind of rethinking these, our freeways, and whether they serve us in the way that we want them to, especially in certain corridors. Maybe there's a better way to do this, and are there some reimagining that we should be doing about how we set these areas of our cities up. So I've been following this, and I was actually dismayed to see that MnDOT had apparently chose to eliminate the at-grade or the boulevard options for the I-94, the rethinking proposal. And I had also heard that those proposals, the at-grade boulevard proposal, scored the highest when MnDOT did a community survey about what the community would like to see. And it was also supported by unanimous city council resolutions asking MnDOT to explore these options and to really study them. And so it was dismaying to find out that MnDOT was choosing to eliminate those as option. And then also, I also found it troubling that MnDOT had chose not to consider the economic potential for repurposing the highway land in your analysis. Now, according to an independent report that was commissioned by some of the people who have been really working on this and thinking about this, as I understand it, they found that there could be 2,450 permanent jobs, 2,230 new homes, and that it could add millions of dollars to the local tax base. So to not consider that economic potential as part of the analysis and study seems to be a real missed opportunity. And so I'm just sort of laying the groundwork for what I want my question to be, but I also understand that there's a policy advisory committee that's worked on this, and the policy advisory committee had tried to take a vote to request that MnDOT continue to study this and to really look at this proposal seriously, but was told that they didn't have the authority to do that. And so there was some discussion about, well, can we have some different bylaws that would actually allow the Public Advisory Committee to take a vote, to make a recommendation, and these are local leaders representing their communities trying to give input to MnDOT. So my question is, whether the Policy Advisory Committee and committees in general at MnDOT have the ability to vote on alternative proposals like the Rethinking I-94 proposals, the at-grade boulevard options. And so do they have the ability to do that? And if they don't, would you create bylaws that will provide them a meaningful role in advising this process?
Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Dibble and Senator McEwen, for that question. Our Policy Advisory Committee, or PAC, for the Rethinking I-94 project was established, as we've done for large projects in the past, where it's an advisory committee to have discussions among the advisory committee members, so typically elected officials, and that's who comprise our current PAC for Rethinking I-94. Certainly, state legislators, of course, county commissioners, city council members have the ability to vote within their own chambers. But what we're looking for is not yay or nay votes on things. We're just looking for input, what people's positions are on things, and we record that in our notes for those meetings. So, so that's how we've been planning to move forward. Now, we did get quite a bit of input about how that could be done differently at our last PAC meeting, which was last Friday. And so we've taken that under advisement. We're going to be talking about the future of the PAC and the role of the members for Rethinking I-94.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. I'm glad that you've taken it under advisement. So what I'm hearing is, like, there's no answer yet. You're thinking about it. Is that correct?
Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, this PAC tried to make their sort of collective opinion about this recorded as a group, but were shut down in that. But MnDOT is considering if there's a different process to be had. Or it sounds like you want this group to come together to offer their input, and so is it just sort of piecemeal? You're just sort of recording down people's ideas? Because it seems like if a group comes together and they say, well, we want to have a resolution, just to tell you we're all in agreement. We want you to study this. This is our community. We really want you to do this. And they're shut down as saying they don't have the power to even vote on a resolution. I would like to see a commitment from MnDOT to make their participation meaningful, and that seems a very baseline type of thing to do. And I just, there is a sense, I would say, both in my community and certainly in following this Rethinking I-94 proposal, that of a question of whether our state government institutions truly have democratic processes that make them accountable to the public that they are supposed to be serving, especially in neighborhoods and locations that have historically been disregarded or not consulted in any way. The importance of truly making the consultation and the participation meaningful. Here you have all of this evidence, all of this participation. You did your own surveys. You have city councils weighing in. You have data about the economic impacts, and you just dropped this proposal even though the PAC is telling you they want to vote to ask you to keep going. So this is a really stark example to me, and it's very concerning about how we're moving forward. Is it going to be democratic? Are we going to have an agency that really is responsive and working in collaboration with community? So thanks for giving me the feedback that you did. I encourage you to dig in on this and to really, really make sure that you're being held accountable to the public and you're holding yourselves accountable in that way too. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen. And yes, we have the shared goal of making sure that our PAC members feel like they are being heard, they are engaged, they have meaningful participation. And we want to hear from all of them. So I think part of what we want to hear between now and say the next time we connect with the PAC is, wanting to hear from all of them how they see that would be done best before we make any decisions as an agency.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you. Just one last question. How long are you going to take to consider on what that might look like? I'm just wondering, is this an indefinite answer? When are you going to get back to them about a decision on changing some bylaws?
Commissioner.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen, want to do that expeditiously, but that doesn't involve reaching out to the PAC members. So, I mean, it's kind of dependent on schedules too, but we'll do what we can to do that expeditiously.
All right, thank you. First I have Senator Jasinski, then I'll go to Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. So it kind of goes a little bit, I actually had the question down before Senator McEwen was talking about that, but on the page 17 side, the Reconnect Rondo, we have $6.2 million that we did in 2021, and we're looking at extending that. And again, I've seen some things in the paper and watching things a little bit and looking at not only Reconnect Rondo, but Rethink 94 and all those things, and had a lot of great presentations. And I know the cities are behind a lot of these things, but they had a lot of pictures of nice looking boulevards, but the traffic's got to go somewhere. And it's getting pushed to some other place. It's either going south to 494 or north to 694. I think we have 5 or 6 hospitals right in that corridor. Just looking at all the traffic in there and taking away lane miles has been some discussion, and obviously that's a concern to me, and I think I have a bill for that. But my concern is how much have we spent between Rondo and Rethink I-94? How much dollars have we spent in planning money on that so far, and what's the overall thought of MnDOT going forward? Is that still looking as going full, or are they reconsidering that? Again, it's just a lot of dollars that are going forward, and again, my concerns are, it looks great on paper and all the trucks are gone and it's all these boulevards and cars and it looks nice and walking trails, but that traffic has to go somewhere, and it is an interstate. That's why there's an I in front of it. So it's taking traffic through the state of Minnesota from Wisconsin to South Dakota and all those different locations. And again, the pictures look great, but the dollar being spent and where that traffic is going to go and the connection of hospitals and all those things are my concern. So do we have a dollar amount that MnDOT has spent out of money that we could be using for roads and bridges that's already been spent on planning?
And I'll start the response. I know money's money, and it's all taxpayer money, but the Reconnect Rondo 6.2 million is a federal grant, so that's not state dollars per se. That helps. Commissioner. But there are definitely a lot has been expended, a lot of effort and time on the I-94 planning process. So, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Chair Jasinski for that question. And I think my colleague Eric Rudin has those numbers at his fingertips. But before I turn it to him, I'll just mention you talked about the traffic on I-94. There is roughly 167,000 vehicles per day on Interstate 94. You mentioned the diversion of traffic. That is one of the main concerns about the at-grade options, as well as congestion at intersections that results in air quality. These are a couple of the main reasons we are not recommending those to move forward. Just wanted to clarify, those are preliminary recommendations at this time. We're going to be working over the next year to finalize recommendations and go to an official public comment period on those recommendations, which will be early next year. But with that, you asked for a number, and I believe my colleague Eric Rudin found that, so if I could turn to him.
Mr. Rudin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have recently just gotten this request from a staff member, so I happen to have it handy here. So this goes back to 2008 when former Commissioner Zelli sort of initiated the process to rethink that corridor. And so, I'm sorry, 2018, my optometrist keeps saying I need bifocals, which I do. So 2018 through basically November of last year, there's been approximately 3.8 or close to 3.9 million in MnDOT staff time on the Rethinking project. And then for various contracts that we've had with consultants and public outreach efforts and so forth, that total is about 15.4 million. So a total, if you add that with the staff time, is approximately 19.25 million.
Senator Jasinski.
And thank you, Mr. Radin. So again, that's a lot of money. And it's to your point, Senator Dibble, yes, that's money that's federal, but that's money that could be used on other federal projects in this state, if not taken for that. But that's just a lot of money when we're looking at, you know, Senator Johnson Stewart, your group was in here yesterday talking about the condition of our roads. A lot of them are C pluses and Ds. And we've spent an awful lot of money on this project. And that's a lot of money that could be going towards a lot of roads and bridges in this state. So it's just my concern, just watching a little bit of what's happening. And then to Senator McEwen's point about economic impacts, again, MnDOT is not here to fund economic things. They're here to fund roads and bridges and not to take it, you know, take those things. DEED can do that and other departments can do that, but MnDOT is my understanding is focused on the transportation issues, not the economic development assets of that. So again, I hope we stick to that and look at those dollar amounts, because that's an awful lot of money for roads and bridges that could bring the condition of our roads and bridges up to better conditions. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very interested in the recruitment of our patrol, our state patrol. I think you had some recruitment and retention in your presentation about that. And I'm wondering if you could refresh for my memory. I'm seeing different numbers in different places. What amount of additional funding are you seeking for recruitment and retention?
Senator Nelson, we're specifically around State Patrol?
Yes.
We're going to hear from the Department of Public Safety next, so they may be able to respond better to that question. I think this would be confined to MnDOT.
Okay, I will leave that for the moment. I think I'm in the wrong spot there. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. I mean, it does come out of the Trunk Highway Fund, so you're not totally off track here, but it's managed by the next group that's coming up. All right. All right. Anything further? Oh, yeah, Senator Howell, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you again, Commissioner. The question I have is about the modernization of the truck stations and taking care of some of the MnDOT's buildings. You know, when we talk to our state colleges and universities, we have the HEFR account, goes kind of through bonding, that type of thing. Why aren't we using bonding for those buildings in MnDOT's upkeep, and why are we going to the Trunk Highway Fund?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and Senator Howe, thank you for that question. This would be just an increase to the base funding to be able to keep up with those needs. And so with that, I believe that is why we looked to trunk highway funds as opposed to trunk highway bonds. But if I could ask my budget director, Sam Brown, to weigh in.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, and for the record, it's Sam Brown from the Office of Finance at MnDOT. Chair Dibble, Senator Howe, we do have a bond program where even last session we received trunk highway bonds for larger capital projects. One issue that we do have is around what is actually eligible for the use of bonds and trunk highway, and this money would really focus more on maintenance than actual capital projects as a whole. So we do go after what we call kind of those budget buster projects that are large brand new truck stations that we do put out throughout the state, and those are funded with trunk highway bonds. This would be more focused on kind of the maintenance of the facilities, and we would have probably some eligibility issues or concerns with working with MMB on what is eligible for that capital nature.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that, but I do believe that if we're putting roofs on buildings and doing much the same thing as state universities do, they come through that bonding project. So I do believe we should look at that, because I think we can do that in a different manner and maintain those trunk highway funds for doing what they're originally designed to do, and that's to build roads and maintain roads and not buildings. And I think we should take a good hard look at that. The other thing, I do have to bring this up. You know, in that meeting, Mr. Rudin, that we had regarding Highway 23, the question that that never got answered for me real well on that meeting was, as we were talking about safety of those intersections, and my concern was there that I think there's alternatives, and I asked those alternatives, and it seemed like the question was, well, we've never done those improvements in our district, and the question was, then are any of those improvements done that way for safety with, right turn buffer lanes, so you don't block the vision at intersections for people looking to cross highways, and acceleration lanes, and if you put a stop sign in the median instead of a yield sign, so we make sure they stop and look. And if we did those improvements all together, has that improved the safety, and has that been done anywhere in the state? And I drew the cricket response. And, we know what's in our district. We don't believe we have that in our district, but we did not have an answer if that's been done in the state. And if it hasn't been done in this state, has it been done in other states that we can get that information? So I don't expect you to have that answer here today, but I would like to have that as a follow-up as to what is the incidence of those, and has it reduced the crash incidents? Because I do agree, we are going to look hard at those intersections in our district, and I do look at Paynesville and the intersections that they got on their bypass and the intersections that we got in Rockville. It is, and that is, I think, wholly why we have the crash incidences that we have in those two intersections, is because they were poorly designed in the first place. And that's what's causing, and not having those sight lines, those buffer strips between the right turn lane and the acceleration lanes, all that would play big into that, and I just don't think it's been looked enough. So I'll pause for that.
Mr. Rudin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Sir Howe, yes, we'll definitely follow up with you. And I understand the frustration about we can't be limited by MnDOT district boundaries on some of these things. So yes, we'll follow up with you on that, definitely.
Thank you, Mr. Rudin. Senator Carlson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is going back a little bit, and both Commissioner and Mr. Rudin mentioned about when we're talking about stopping doing the at-grade or the boulevard solution for I-94, and how much planning has happened. And you mentioned about $20 million in planning, something like that. How much of that, or was there planning that was dedicated to looking at where this additional traffic might be on new routes that is not going to be able to be handled on that boulevard? And is that something that MnDOT would handle, or is that something that once we throw it off of the I-94 corridor, is that St. Paul and Minneapolis responsible for that?
Sorry, who's up, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator
Commissioner, before you answer, we're obviously, members are really interested in the DOT budget presentation, so we're just going to have to reschedule the final two items. So we're just going to, once we're done with this part, we'll adjourn. Thanks. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Carlson for the question. Yes, part of the work that we've done was having a third-party consultant come and take a look at that traffic analysis. Was that broken out separately in what you were going through?
Mr. Rudin.
Mr. Chair and Senator Carlson, that would have been included in the the numbers I was sharing. But yeah, we have done a preliminary analysis of what would happen to especially parallel corridors, so University Avenue, Lake Street, even Summit Avenue, as well as some of the more regional roadways. So, a lot of the traffic would probably go up 35E to Highway 36 and then down into Minneapolis. Some would divert to 494 or 694. But we do have some of that modeling that shows what the impacts would be. And we did include, because we've seen this on in other places where a roadway might be closed for a construction project. There is a certain percentage of traffic that just does sort of evaporate, that people will not take those trips. They'll decide, since the facility isn't there, they rather than take a trip today, they'll combine a trip that they're planning to take next week and do things like that. So it's an estimate, of course, it's a model, but it's a fairly sophisticated model, and so we can certainly share that with you if you're interested in seeing that.
All right. Members, further questions? Senator Johnson-Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise to be quick. Before I ask the question about recruitment, just to note that in 1986, I did start work at HNTB, only to find out a month later that MnDOT wanted to interview me. So I think it's been a challenge for a while. So I really want to draw attention to the recruitment issue. It's not just an issue at MnDOT. It's certainly an issue throughout our entire industry. We have been studying this problem for my entire career, so I would say for 30 years. So I just, and that being the issue that we don't have enough civil engineers or technicians to do the work. And so I just want to encourage MnDOT to consider ways that they might actually lead the effort that's been happening both on the consultant side and the MnDOT side. I'm thinking that federal highway formula funds can be used to somehow maybe collaborate with consultants, but this is an issue at the city, the county, the state, and the private level, and I would love to work with MnDOT on this. So just wanted to bring that up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, anything further? All right. Members, as you're no doubt aware, whenever the governor delivers his budget, included in that is some level of detail in the form of the budget narrative pages. So we will send a link to those at the MMB website, and you can look at some of the additional rationale and justification for particularly the policy recommendations and the change items that are coming forward from MnDOT, as well as the other two agencies that we're responsible for. Additionally, it occurred to me that we need a little, the presentations by Counsel and Fiscal were fantastic, but I was reviewing the larger statewide 20-year planning document over the weekend, and there's just a lot of great just base information about the size of our system and who it serves and the nature of our system, just some context for the kinds of numbers that we look at, the kind of transportation that's provided and why it's provided and how it's provided. For example, one of my favorite statistics, everyone knows what I'm going to say, whoever listens to me, we have the 4th largest roadway system in the country, not on a per capita basis, by lane mile, which is great. That's to our credit, to the credit of those who came before us. We're I think the 12th largest by land mass, the 22nd largest by population. We're middle of the pack in terms of the size of our gross state product, but we have the 4th largest roadway system. But are we getting out of that, and are we making sure that that roadway system serves all users? Making sure that everyone can get where they need to go or not, it certainly helps. It's a big reason why we have, a fairly successful economy relative to other similarly situated states, but it's a lot of roadway to keep up too. So it just helps us understand some of those things. And there's also some really good information about how the world and our economy, et cetera, is changing and how our transportation system needs to change to reflect that. So we'll get all of that to you with some links in the next day or so, as well as that the book that corresponds to the November forecast, the booklet, which is interesting and worth glancing through. I'll also just say that this is just the first presentation on the MnDOT budget. At some point, it'll come forward in the form of legislation, where we'll have a more formalized hearing on the matter. We'll be taking testimony, so we'll have more opportunity to dig deep and ask more questions, and of course, bring our ideas forward in terms of the budget that we all craft together. So. Ms. Ethier wanted me to point out that we have some other documents that were just included, the permanent rules, the temporary rules, et cetera. So, keep those in your save folders so we can refer to those if we ever need to cross that threshold. And with that, that's all I've got. I could say a lot about the budget. I have a lot of questions as well, but I'm going to save those for another time. We are meeting next Monday. We'll be collaborating on what that agenda is. Any closing words, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone, and apologize that we went long, but there is a lot of great things we're discussing, and we like that discussion. So I'll meet with Senator Dibble, and we'll discuss the agenda for Monday. Some may be possibly extensions of what we didn't get to today. There might be some other things we'd like to get in, but we'll try and have that out. I believe by Friday is our deadline to post, and we'll do our best to get that out as soon as we can so you know what's coming. And again, I apologize for being a little late getting here today, and that won't happen again because we're obviously going to have some big discussion, so look forward to Monday's meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anything further, members? With that, we are adjourned.